Hi.
Hi, Marcy. How are you?
Oh God. You would think I'm not a millennial. I'm fine. How are you?
Listen. I'm great. I'm great. Thank you so much. How's your day going?
So far, so good. I can't complain.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much for Marcy for joining us today. My name is Aaron Campbell. I am the fashion editor for the Quintessential Gentleman, and welcome to another fantastic live that we have for you. We are so lucky today to have another great guest, Marci Rodgers, who is with us today, who is going to shed some insight on her path into her career in costume design and wardrobe styling, as well as how some tips that you all may be able to take away for your career trajectory if you're interested in going into the entertainment industry. Of course, Marcy's going to speak about her story, but at a high level, she's worked on some really dope projects, including Black Klansman, as well as She's Gotta Have It, and she is also a fellow HBCU alum. She is a graduate of Howard University, where she received her BBA, as well as an MBA from Florida International University, as well as a certificate in fashion design from the London Fashion College, as well as an MFA in costume design from the University of Maryland. So she is definitely as learned as she is stylish. And she is going to help us again break down some ways that are tangible for you all to be able to apply to your careers in terms of wanting to, if you are interested in going into costume or styling, as well as just generally working in the entertainment industry. So thank you so much, Marcy, for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you. So I just wanted to start off with just checking on how you're doing with everything going on in the world, all this craziness with COVID. How have you been handling that? How have you been handling lockdown?
Well, honestly, I've just been praying a lot. I've been meditating and just kind of journaling and going through the motions. I'm sure as everyone else. Thankfully, I was able to come home and be with my family in a suburb of Chicago. So that
Nice.
actually grounded me, honestly, because I was in the middle of a production. Um, and I was out in LA. And once we got word that the production shut down, it was kind of like a no brainer. I just wanted to come back to my roots. So I
Yeah.
came back home. Um, and unfortunately, we have lost a few of our family members, but I think it's
I'm sorry to
definitely
hear that.
brought back the sense of family and understanding what that actually means. And I think, which I could touch on later, but being in the entertainment industry, you kind of get blown away by whatever's going on. But family and friends, those are the ones that were there. Or for me, I can speak for me in particular that were there when I was speaking my life into existence and
Mm,
manifesting what I did
mm.
and praying for me actually. So
Yes. Yes, no, I definitely can connect with you on that. Sticking kind of with family and where you're from, would love to. I always think context is important because we see people who are doing these great things like you, but we often don't know the path. So, can you give us some context of kind of your, how you got into fashion and costume and growing up, how that influenced your life all the way up to, you being a student at Howard?
sure. Well, I went to Evanston Township and I was always into fashion. I mean, I'm an 80s baby. So I remember when Tommy Hilfiger was a thing.
Yes.
And I would show up to school probably with, I would say at the time for the Midwest and Chicago, suburbs of Chicago, I should say, I think the flyest. And I always had a passion for fashion. I love sneakers. I always had the first pair, like the new Jordans, the Pippins. I pretty much had everything, thankfully, thanks to my mom. Because obviously I couldn't leave school. And that kind of like floated at the time. I was nominated best dress at my high school. And again, I didn't really know much about costume design. I just had a passion for it. I would watch the way my father dressed. My dad, to this very day, does not own a pair of jeans. So my dad wears a walking suit for the most part. It's kind of, like I tease him when I see him in sweatpants because that's not his thing. And I would also watch the way my mother dressed. During the day, she dressed very casually, but she also would, Sunday, it would be her Sunday's best. Like she would put it on. And being a kid who grew up in the suburbs and going in and out of Chicago, I would just kind of compare everything. Also, not to mention during the time, that's when hip hop was on its rise.
Right.
So MTV, I would come home from, school, and MTV would, I would literally just look at the TV like, oh my God, I want to be that, or I think I do. Not even really understanding what it meant. I would read like the Source magazines, Double XL, Hype Hair. I'm telling my age. 17 magazine, sort of. I would watch The Box, MTV Raps, I think. Yeah. And just kind of see the way the East Coast was dressing.
Yep.
And to me, it was so far away, I guess, as a child, but not understanding that that would be me one day. Um, so
Mm.
leading up to Howard, when I got to Howard, is a bit of a culture shock, to be honest with you, because you have all of you. It's like a melting pot almost. You have people
Right.
from the West, you have people from the West Coast, you have people from the East Coast, you have people from the Caribbean. And I remember days walking down the yard like, wow, look at how she dresses or how she talks. Does that influence how she dresses? Um, I'll touch on it a little bit later, but I will never forget when I met my mentor, Reggie Ray, or at least I saw him as, the personified version of him. Eventually I worked with him later, but I just remember how he carried himself. And then 10 years later, I would become his last assistant, and unfortunately there when he passed. So I would say coming from Chicago, suburbs of Chicago, and going to Howard, it definitely influenced me a lot.
And you kind of talked about your experience at Howard. In doing research for our conversation, I was taken aback by just how dynamic your educational experiences are and
Oh,
the combination of them. And I'm just wondering if that was intentional or if that just came as you went along, in terms of figuring out, oh, okay, this is something that could be interesting to me, or this is like a good fit here. And how has that impacted how you've been able to navigate your work?
well, so as you mentioned, I have a BBA in marketing. And the way that the program is set up at Howard is you can't. Well, I don't know if it's that way now, but when I was there, you couldn't take classes. You can only take a few electives in other schools. So because I always had this burning desire to go to fashion school, so let's back up. When I graduated from from high school, I told my father I had gotten accepted to a fashion school in New York, and he was like, "No." And I just thought he was the worst person on the planet. I'm like, oh my God, this is wrong. It's like, I'm so close. And he said,
Right.
you have to go to school for business. So I actually attended Chicago State. Let's put that on, and sometimes I know it doesn't get a lot of shine, but I attended Chicago State, majored in finance before I transferred to Howard. So I transferred to Howard. At that point, that's when I was taking classes in School of Business and Marketing, and I had a few electives. So I started taking classes in arts and sciences and fashion. And that was my fix, I thought. So I left Howard, moved back to Chicago. I worked at Tiffany and Company for 6 months, and I still had the itch. I'm like, I love you, Chicago, but I got to go again, like Kanye. So I left and worked at the admissions office at Howard's Law School. I'm sorry, in the undergraduate department. And then within like 6 months, I was promoted to the law school. Um, so I worked at the law school for 6 months. And then within another 6 months, I was promoted to assistant director of admissions of the law school. So I was the youngest assistant director of admissions. And at the time, I didn't have a law degree. So in all honesty, I was thinking about going to law school, but a lot of my sorority sisters have law degrees. So I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but you know, and I started teaching at University of District of Columbia. I actually taught history of costume and retail buying because I
Mm.
always had a passion for it. And just something just told me like, why not get your MBA? So then I got my MBA, a corporate MBA, and then I had enough time, vacation time, to actually go study abroad in London. And
Nice.
once I went to Central St. Martin's, I remember getting off the plane. I took a step back. I didn't stay at a 5-star hotel. I stayed in like a co-ed dorm. And it would be times where I knew they didn't speak English and I didn't speak whatever language they spoke. But that I stripped myself of everything. And I read the book The Alchemist, and while I was there, I like finished it within a couple days. And after that, I knew my life had forever changed. So when I came back, in all honesty, I wanted to be a dean of a fashion program, right? Because I was in education.
Right.
But I have a close friend who's actually a sorority sister. I remember right before I left, she told me you need to find a mentor. And at that point, that's why I used the word manifesting, because I started to manifest that. And I was like, well, who's going to be my mentor? And I actually reached back out to a young lady who I co-styled a photo shoot with. Her name is Sankara, and she told me you should reach out to Reggie Ray. And I remember Reggie, and I was like, he was kind of weird back then. And I sent him a Facebook message. He's, you know, back in the day, you can actually see, it would say seen. And
Right.
he ignored me. And I was like, all in my feelings. I'm like, oh my God, Reggie just ignored me. And then I worked up enough nerve and I reached back out to him again. And he told me to meet him at Starbucks on Georgia Avenue. And that's pretty much how my journey went. So in answer to your question, I wanted to be over a program as it related to fashion, because that's what I was studying. But God had another path for me. And I didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
Because I
does.
couldn't have gotten promoted because I was the assistant director of admissions. I couldn't go over my boss because he was the dean of admissions, right?
Yeah.
So it was either go to another school, or, which happened, I was actually laid off from Howard. So the day I was laid off was the day I started working full time in costume design.
Got it. And I'm going to move to a question directed to that in a second. But for people who don't know, Central St. Martin is like a big deal in terms of fashion. A lot of major people in the fashion industry, fashion designers, people in different parts of the industry have gone to Central St. Martin. So that's just from knowing that is major. But I think one question that may be simple to some, but even, you know, as I thought about it, I didn't even really have a straightforward answer. How did you actually become a costume designer? And is that aligned to what generally happens for most people? Is it like a one size fits all type path, or is it really case by case for people in terms of their entry into the industry?
I want to say two things. One, I tell people my journey was God, because again, I came from an education background. So the way that my career, as some say, is skyrocketed, which that's the human version of it. Um, is nothing but that. But because I didn't have a background in costume design, I remember when I was assisting Reggie Ray, I would tell him, you know, I wanted to go back to school, because I was an adult, right? I have a house in Maryland. I was working at Howard's Law School, like the premier Black law school. I had it, but I knew it was something that I still wanted. So I remember walking through the yard one day saying, I'm going to go to Yale for costume design. Had no experience whatsoever. The first thing Reggie said to me was, you have to sign up for a sewing class. And he was very serious about it. And I remember driving from DC to the middle of Maryland, like a little bit outside of Baltimore. Some days it would take me 2 hours just to be a part of a class that was 45 minutes. And before I could even finish the class, I'd have to send him my work, or he'd have to look at the syllabus to even approve it. Now, let me
Oh,
take
wow.
a step back. Reggie Ray was a Broadway costume designer, and if anybody went to Howard, I would say from 2006 back, they're in fine arts, they're familiar with Reggie. Like, Reggie was everything. So that's what I did. And then I worked up enough nerve to visit University of Maryland, where I met my other mentor, Helen Huang, who's the director of the program at University of Maryland. And I kind of joke about it because I've pledged before, so I didn't really have much to lose. So I remember walking into her, you know, and she was like, "Why should I accept you?" And I just remember being on the spot, like. But after I left and visited University of Maryland, I hand wrote her a thank you card, And I would say 2 weeks later, she sends me an email, which I think Reggie must have given it to her because I don't know how she had it. Helen Wong wrote me an email and said, "You've been accepted to University of Maryland with a full scholarship and assistantship."
Wow.
So, in answer to your question, I tell people if you want to be a costume designer, you first have to love art. When I was a kid, my father would teach me, like bubble letters. And like I would pay attention to color. I remember growing up, and we would be able to like paint murals. Again, I'm a suburban kid at heart. So
Right.
you have to really understand art and understand how to read art, right? Like I loved art, but I didn't know how to read it. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
And most filmmakers actually love art. Like it's not just about the fame and the glory. You have to really understand art. And let me be very clear. I was the underdog in my program, right? I was the only Black person, really. I was the oldest, and I knew nothing about costume design. But when I graduated from University of Maryland, I graduated top of my class, commencement speaker, and I'm on the board of directors. And
Come on, boards.
So I say all that to say, you have to be willing to also go through the process because there's a process. And most people want to skip the process. And it's like, I don't think it benefits you down the end of the road, if that makes sense.
Right. Yep.
So to be a costume designer, an answer in short, you definitely have to love art. And if you do want to be a costume designer, I advise you to start getting art books and just like staring at them.
Nice.
Because that's what I had to do.
We love tangible pieces of information, things people can take away. That's a really good point. Speaking of art and artists, you have worked with a number of really talented artists, one of which is my Morehouse brother, Spike Lee. So yeah. I'm wondering how you got connected or how you started working with Spike, and what was the process like with some of the projects that you've worked on, particularly like the Black Klansman, for example?
So, excuse me, I met Spike at Reggie Ray's opening, which for those who are from New York or familiar with the theater world, Broadway, Reggie had designed Holler If You Can Hear Me, which was a play directed by Kenny Leon. And it was inspired by the music based on Tupac, right? It lasted like all of 5 minutes. But I remember being in the audience and I was hearing mumblings like people would say Spike's here, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I kind of get that part of me from my dad because my dad told me as a kid, like, I'm the most important person in the room, which that's a whole other conversation for another day. So when I heard he was there, I was like, oh, cool, Spike's here, So fast forward to the after party. We go to the after party and I'm actually just kind of taken in the room, right? Because I'm trying to manifest this. This is what I want, right? To be a part of this world and what it means. And Mr. Lee was there. I call him Mr. Lee. And I just really, at that point, I was like, I'm going to walk up to him. And I did. I mean, remember I said I pledged, so I kind of know what it feels like to play, right?
The audacity to move, right.
So I was like, okay, either he could tell me yes or he could tell me no. So I walked up to him and I said, hi, Mr. Lee, my name is Marci. And it was the corniest thing I ever said. I was like, I just watched School Days. And because I actually did. And he was like, oh, great. What are you here for? And I said, I'm actually, I assisted my mentor, Reggie Ray, on this Broadway production. And he was like, that's not what I asked you. Why are you here? And I was like, and at that point, my gears just like jumped on. I was like, oh, all right, it's a party now. Let's go. Right. So he's like, well, what are you doing here? Where do you go to school? I said, I go to University of Maryland. And as everyone knows, Spike is a huge sports fan. So the first thing he said was Terrapins. And I'm like, yeah. So fast forward the conversation where at this point he literally has me on my toes, and I'm like, all right, I gotta stay on my toes. But I didn't really care what came out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I knew it was either a yes or no. So I remember he said to me, and never forget it, he said, do you know who Ruth Carter is? And I swear to you, I like drew a blank. I was like, yeah, I know who Ruth Carter is. And he's like, no, you don't. I was like, I do. You just told me who she is. He didn't tell me. But he, at that point, he knew, like, all right, if she can go, she can go.
You
And
can
I was
keep
like,
up.
yeah, let's go. So he says, literally, he says to me, next time I see you, you need to know all the Black costume designers. And I was kind of like, you know, next time you see me, that was first thing. But then all the Black costume designers is a whole thing. And then he says, I want you to contact Ruth. So he coordinates where I contact Ruth Carter. And I remember saying, well, what am I supposed to say to her? And he said, I just told you what to tell her. I said, call her or reach out to her. So I reached out to Ruth. She immediately responded. And I would say maybe 4 or 5 months later, I was in Atlanta assisting her on a movie. And then 2 or 3
Nice.
months later, I was assisting her on Chirac, the movie she designed in Chicago. So that's pretty much what it was. I was like, what do I have to lose? And I just went for it. And that's what happened, really.
That is super dope, and I think a word one on, and I think Eric put it in the comments. Shoot your shot, because
Yeah.
to your point, they can only tell you yes or no. But also, I find even myself being in positions of where someone may give you someone's contact information, or someone may say you should reach out to so and you don't know what to say. To your
Yeah.
point, Spike said, "I just told you what to say. Say that I told you to reach out." So I think that in itself is a lesson or a word right there. But
Yeah.
I know
But
there's so much.
let's back up though. Shoot your shot. Let me say this. You have to understand the moment. And I think sometimes like you could be given, I could take you all the way to the end of the finish line. But if you don't understand the moment,
Yep.
then it's not going to work for you, if that makes sense. Or it's not going to work for what you're trying to get out of it. Because,
Yeah.
and you can't be, you can't come to it expecting something out of it because the other person's in control. And it's energy, right? Like,
Yep.
I guess at that point, when I introduced myself to Mr. Lee, our energies, you know what I mean? It was like, okay, I actually like her energy. So when I got to Ruth, like not to mention that I had assisted Ann Roth, who is the godmother of costume design, so to speak.
Yep.
I had just connected with Paul Tazwell, who is like the godfather of costume design. And then I'm now reaching Ruth. So I have this trifecta. So at that point, by the time I got to Ruth with Spike's sponsorship, so to speak, it was a little bit different. But like
Got it.
if it's just a stranger, you kind of have to understand the situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I want to talk to you a little bit about like your process in working. So, I've seen She's Gotta Have It. I watched the show, and one thing about that show, and knowing that you did the costumes and worked on the costumes for that show, one thing about that show that I found really interesting is just a diverse array of characters on the show, both women and men characters. And how their personalities were not just different in what they were saying and their actions, but also through the way that they dressed and how they were styled on the show. So I'm wondering your process in like what was your process in taking those characters from script to screen and really making sure that their personalities shine through in their wardrobes?
Well, let's take a step back. When I was at University of Maryland, right before I graduated, I had the opportunity to take a master class, which is like a combination of set design, costume design, and lighting design. And admittedly, because I felt like I was an underdog, I didn't take the class. But that was actually the smartest thing I could have did because I took dramaturgy. And a lot of
Mm,
people kind of looked at me like, well, why is she taking dramaturgy? But if anybody knows anything about theater, again, if you want to be a costume designer, kind of think I'm answering the question a little bit early on, but you should definitely take or read a dramaturgy book, because dramaturgy taught me how to read in between the lines, right? So whatever's on paper, like the script will say Mars wears a Mars chain, but what does that mean? Like,
Right.
why does he wear that chain? So you have to be purposeful when you're doing anything, not just costume design, just in general. So for She's Gotta Have It, the first season, I pretty much created Nola from scratch. Other than the black dress that she wore, like Nola's style was all me. Jamie, the way the like the nuances he had in his tie, maybe his pocket square, how tailored his suits was, that was all me.
Yep.
Greer, all me. Mars, obviously, that had a lot to do with Spike, because that was that he was Spike. So it was almost as if I had to be very, not careful, but take his lead on Mars.
Yeah.
But a lot of the way that I put together the colors and how I mashed it up or like paired it together, that was me.
Nice.
It first season was it was a challenge. I hate to say the word challenge. It was an obstacle, because you got to think about it. I had just graduated from grad school, so I had never done film before. Like, that was my first ever production, so to speak. So, and I went straight into TV. But second season was really when I got a chance to make things happen. Like, I custom made pretty much all of Mars's costume, like his Jordan,
Oh, wow.
shirts and all that. Nola, I made a lot of things for Nola. At that point, I was able to start manufacturing, or like actually designing things for Greer. And there are other characters, but you got to think about it. They're real people. So you kind of go back into your arsenal, right? You're like, well, who does this person remind me of? Like, who does this character actually remind me of? And how do they dress? Like Nola's dad, the walking suits. Remember, I was told you like earlier, my dad never wore jeans. It was easy. I was like, I got it. I know exactly who that person is.
Yeah.
So that was my journey. Second season, I actually attended the Spike had a casting call, and I sat in the back and watched everybody for like 2 hours. Because remember, I'm not from New York, and I was like, I'd be damned if somebody from New York say that's not right. Like, it's almost a
That's a good
disrespect.
point. Yeah. Yeah.
It's disrespectful. And I understand that as an artist. So I just would really either sit there and watch people in New York and the way they dress, like who wore Timbs, who didn't wear Timbs, how did they wear it, who was more flashier, people from Harlem, sort of, like it just, or
Right.
People from Brooklyn dress a little bit different. So that's what I did.
No, that's awesome. No, that's really great insight. And thank you for sharing all of this. I mean, these are gems. So I want to switch gears kind of to still saying with regard to entertainment, but switching gears a bit. So we hear a lot of talk about diversity and the need for diversity in the entertainment industry broadly. And when it gets down to particular roles in entertainment, we often hear about actors and actresses. We need more diverse people on screen. We need more diverse directors, even more diverse people in the writer's room. But we don't hear as much about the need for diversity in other areas like costume, or at least I haven't, like areas like costume design. I'm wondering, from your, being in the game, do you feel like costume design and wardrobe styling is more diverse or less diverse than other elements of the industry? Is it pretty much in line with what else is happening? And how has that impacted your work and your ability to navigate the space?
I don't. Well, I mean, you just got to think about it. Compare our industry to any other industry, right? There's less of in any other industry. So I don't really want to, because I feel like that can breed negativity. What I will say is there's opportunity for growth, and there's opportunity for people of color to be a part of the industry. And if you do plan on being a part of the industry, I beg you, I plead to you to please come with as much excellence as you can, because then it will allow for more of those stereotypes to be destroyed by the
Yeah.
people who actually make those decisions. I mean, there's been times where, as a costume designer, I've been in a room and the director might say, pictures up, and I might, and I would be like, wait a minute, that doesn't even make sense, because that's not what a normal person would do, especially a person of color. And the director may not be a person of color. They may be, Caucasian or some other. And I'm like, nah, that's not how we do things, and instead of stepping on the person's toes, then I become a collaborator, right? So it's like, oh, she's a collaborator. And so I think, in answer to your question, I see some, like, one of my favorite movies of all time was costume designed by a white woman, Marci Rodgers. She costume designed Beetlejuice. She called me when I was nominated for Black Klansman. I don't even know how she got my number, and I'm like, or even there was a white woman who costume designed Coming to America 1. So I don't want to start talking about color in a way. There are arguments out there, don't get me wrong. But as an artist, if you can tell the story, by all means. But if there is a costume designer of color that can definitely portray and put out the story that you're trying to, like, design the story that you're trying to tell, then fine.
Yeah.
And anybody who's on this chat who knows me, I would be like, that's just not right. And and it sometimes it might come out nicely. Sometimes it might be like, no, that's not going. But in the end, you're like, I'm glad she did that, because that could have been a very bad thing.
Right.
Because the general public, they don't know about these stories that go on behind the scenes.
Right.
Right. So yes, I mean, and for somebody who's in position to hire people of color, I try to do my best to do that if I can.
Speaking of that, we both come from HBCUs, and we know that HBCUs, not just Black talent, but in terms of talent generally, produce, top talent across different industries. But, we often also know or see that there may not necessarily be the pipelines to actually get from school to industry may not necessarily be as strong as, say, a Yale School of Management. I'm talking about entertainment now, but say a Yale School of Drama, not management. A Yale School of Drama, or a UFM, or the New School in New York, right? So how, if in any way, do you think Black Hollywood or leaders in Black Hollywood can create stronger pipelines to help get HBCU alum or current students in the door more quickly or more effectively into spaces in the entertainment industry?
Well, I think there is definitely a mentorship program, because remember, let's back up. I knew nothing about the world of costume design, right? As a person of color in a predominantly white high school in a suburb of Chicago, as well as at Howard. So first and foremost, that conversation needs to be had. I mean, and these are conversations that, like, we're having now, but again, that little kid that's like in the classroom doodling has no idea that they're creating a character, let alone can bring that character from the page to actuality and then clothing. I think, when I was growing up, we had sewing class, we had wood shop. Like, to me, that's where my creativity came in. So if I can, and I have the opportunity to, like, help somebody just get closer to their dreams, or just say, consider this, then I try outside of the world of costume design. I think that sometimes it's not that easy, though, because you have the bureaucracy of institutions. So, you can have opportunities like this, but I think there needs to be a curriculum, because at the end of the day, it's a craft, right?
Yep.
And most of these people who started they're like masters of the craft, so to speak. So, as Black Hollywood, I think we could help, and I think we could help. I feel younger, like the 6 to 10-year-olds, where their imagination is just bubbling. Like, they just like me, like I knew, like I knew I was leaving Evanston, like, early on.
Yeah.
But also us collaborate with each other. I mean, let's just be honest. So, but again, you don't know, like nobody really knows about me. Spike took a chance on me so people know about me.
Right.
Um, but they don't really know me. You know, they know my name, so to speak. So I think we can all come in a room and be in a room together, but it's almost like, okay, now what do we do next?
Yeah.
And the only thing
Yeah.
I can do is go back to my university, which I hold dear to my heart, which is Howard University. You know, like I got my master's in costume design from University of Maryland. Let's be clear, but I'm a bison all day long.
Right.
So I'm going back to my sorority. I'm going back to the School of Business. I'm going back to Arts and Sciences because I have to give that back to Reggie because he gave me life.
Yeah.
And then work it out that way. But Howard has a costume design program.
Perfect. No, I think that's really good advice. Shout out to all the frats and sororities in the room. I see a lot of,
Oh
a lot of
yeah.
emojis pop up. Just want to
If you
shout
if
out
you haven't noticed what I am, I'm sure they'll flood the scene.
my sister is your soror. So, but no, I always love to kind of wrap up. This has been amazing. You've dropped some gems. I always try to wrap up. I think it's fun to wrap up these interviews with some rapid fire questions just to kind of see what you're thinking about and kind of see where your mind is and what your thoughts are. So real quick, go through them real quick. First answers that come to your mind. I'm going to run through them real fast. So let me know when you're
Sure.
ready.
Okay.
Cool. So perfect. So, do you prefer to work on costumes for multi-episode television or for feature films?
All.
All of them?
I say all because I do theater. I've just designed an opera. I do TV, television. So it's
But you
all.
got to pick one. What's your favorite, though,
Oh,
if you had to choose?
I never play fair. Film.
Okay, film. Perfect. Who would be your dream actor or actress to work with in a production?
George Clooney.
Nice, nice, nice. Cool. Do you prefer to source vintage or modern clothing for your work?
Lord. um, Vintage.
Nice, nice, nice. What is your favorite fashion decade to reference?
Ooh. Well, thankfully I've done them all at this point. I'd say the 50s. No, the 20s,
Nice,
the
nice.
20s, the 20s, the 20s. Take it
Cool.
back. The 20s. The
And why
20s.
do you say the 20s? I'm curious. Why do you say the 20s?
Because if you go back into the Harlem Renaissance and those pictures of like the women back then, it was just like they came every day with their Sunday's best. Like it was not a game. I actually just designed a movie with starring Tessa Thompson, and it's based in 1920s. Um, and when you see it, you'll see how beautiful it is because it was shot in black and white. So you actually don't see the color. You see the silhouette of the costume. So I say the 20s.
Nice, nice. Last question, kind of a two-part. Who do you think is the most stylish actress and the most stylish actor in Hollywood?
Um, I like the way Tessa dresses. Tessa's fly.
So,
Um, Best dressed actor. Hmm. Does it have to be an actor? Because I'm not gonna lie. I've become a fan of Black AFS in Kenya. His wardrobe was his ward. Anybody who knows me knows I could be a labor whore at times. Um, his wardrobe was fly. Like,
nice.
and I
Okay,
feel like
we
that's
can
how he
take that.
dresses in person. So,
We'll take
um,
that.
otherwise Spike because I dress him.
Nice. No, we always love Spike. All HBCU alums, so I'm here for except for Tessa, but Tessa's fine.
Yes.
So thank you so much. I always, in closing, you mentioned some like really, really tangible things that people can do from studying art to shooting their shot in context. I'm wondering if there are any other things you want to leave our viewers with in terms of what they can do to maybe get started or propel their career in the costume or the wardrobe or generally entertainment space, or just anything you want to leave as kind of just a final word.
I think what I would like to say is that don't be afraid of rejection, especially for somebody who was rejected, and didn't really know what was coming on the other side. Um, Rejection isn't always a no. and also be okay with constructive criticism. I think a lot of times people kind of like clam up and feel like they're being attacked when, you know, it's cute to play in clothes, but time is money. And
Yep.
one thing that Reggie would tell me is it's business show, it's not show business. So at the end of the day, the money is equated to a minute, and understanding that. And that goes back to my business head, right? Like there's been times where something has happened and I remember a producer would come and tell me like that just cost us $20,000, and then I got an extra
Wow.
gray hair in the front of my head because I'm like, how? What happened? You know, how could I have prevented it? So
Yep.
understanding that you can't put out all fires, but knowing that you're a collaborator and really understanding what a collaboration means, because a lot of times
Yep.
it means you're not going to win, but it's not about winning. When you come into a project, be it a stylist, a director, a costume designer, it's never about you. And I
Yep.
think for those who are on this live can say that sometimes I do that to a fault, that it's not about me.
Yep.
Because I realize when I sign up for a project, I'm there to tell the story. And a lot of times I don't even like, I'm so emotionally attached to it, I have to literally like unplug and go
Mhm.
back. Like in all honesty, I just watched Wu-Tang completely through, right? And I people will tell you I'm very modest, and I'm like, damn, I did a good job for not to be, you know. And so I would say three things: understand the moment, be okay with no,
Mm.
please, and thank you,
Mm.
um, and don't get too cocky
Yeah.
because people don't like to work. People don't like to be around cocky people. Not like
Yeah.
that.
That's real.
Um,
Yeah.
that's like nah, that's not cool.
And I think that's a word. And I think those are three things that I think whether you want to go in entertainment or anywhere in life, we can apply across everything.
Sure.
So I definitely appreciate you sharing all those gems with us. I appreciate you taking the time
Oh,
to
you're
have this
welcome.
conversation.
Well, it's not like I have
And
anything else to do. We're sheltered in place.
thank you. I hope the rest of your quarantine lockdown continues to be blessed. Hopefully, we get to partner like this again. Thank you so much again for your
Sure.
time, Mark. I really enjoyed talking to you. And thank you
Thank
all
you.
so much for joining us for this live. Remember to check out our content as we throughout this period and beyond. My name is Aaron Campbell again, and have a good evening.
Have a good one.
Bye, Marcy. Talk
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.